The rain did not just fall, it hammered against the glass of the Kingsley Tech Tower like 1,000 desperate hands begging for entry. Inside the lobby, the air was climate-controlled and scented with expensive cedar, a sharp contrast to the freezing deluge raging just inches away on the other side of the automatic doors. Gideon Fairchild stood on the wrong side of that glass, his security uniform soaked through to his skin, water dripping from the brim of his cap to hide the quiet fury in his eyes. He wasn't locked out by accident. The deactivation of his keycard was manual, deliberate, and malicious. Through the pane, he could see the silhouette of Marlowe Kingsley, the CEO, laughing with a flute of champagne in hand, pointing at the shivering guard as if he were an exhibit in a cruel zoo. Gideon didn't pound on the door. He didn't beg. He simply watched, his hand brushing against the hidden pocket inside his jacket where a crumpled, notarized document lay against his chest. They thought he was a pawn in their corporate game, a disposable object to be humiliated for sport. They didn't know that the man they left to freeze held the fire that would burn their empire to the ground. Don't look away, because the storm is just beginning. The storm that night was historic, a meteorological event that the news anchors had been warning about for days with breathless panic, turning the city streets into rushing rivers of black, oily water. Gideon Fairchild stood like a statue in the center of the chaos, his boots submerged in a freezing puddle that numbed his toes, while the wind whipped his soaked jacket against his broad chest. He had been patrolling the perimeter when the lock clicked shut, a distinct, mechanical sound that echoed with finality in the dark. It was the sound of authority asserting itself over the helpless. He had tried the card reader 3 times, watching the red light blink its denial with a mocking rhythm, refusing him safe entry. Inside the grand lobby, the warm amber glow of the chandeliers spilled out onto the wet pavement, illuminating his isolation. He could see the warmth, he could almost smell the coffee brewing, but an invisible digital wall kept him trapped in the violent cold. It was not a malfunction, the system was too sophisticated for errors. This was a message sent from the penthouse suite down to the gutter. Gideon wiped the rain from his eyes, his movements slow and deliberate, refusing to give the audience inside the satisfaction of his panic. He knew exactly who was watching the security feeds at this hour, and he knew the game was being played for an audience of one. His military training kicked in, a familiar calm settling over him, lowering his heart rate even as his body temperature began to drop. He was used to hostile environments and enemies who hid in shadows, but this enemy wore a bespoke suit and hid behind digital locks. Above him, the glass skyscraper pierced the clouds like a needle, a monument to arrogance built on the backs of invisible workers. Kingsley Tech was celebrated for connecting the world through data, yet it couldn't find the humanity to open a door for a guard. Gideon checked his watch, the glow of the dial barely visible, marking the minutes he had been standing in the hypothermic rain. 20 minutes had passed since the shift change should have happened. Every minute was a line item on a ledger he would settle later. He turned his back to the wind, shielding his face from the sting, and looked at the blurred reflection of himself in the dark glass. He didn't look like a man who controlled a voting block of shares, he looked like a hired hand, a nobody, a ghost in a uniform. That was his armor, the invisibility that allowed him to survive, but tonight, the armor felt heavy, weighed down by the water. He wondered how long they would let him stand there before moving, before the cruelty became boring and they moved to the next toy. A flash of lightning illuminated the lobby for a split second, revealing the empty reception desk where help should have been. Usually, there was a friendly face there, someone who cared, but the desk was vacant, likely cleared out by a direct order. Isolation was the first weapon of the tyrant, removing allies, making the victim feel as though the entire world had turned away. Gideon clenched his jaw, his teeth chattering despite his will, and tightened his grip on the flashlight he hadn't yet turned on. He reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing the wet fabric, feeling the outline of the old leather wallet that held the truth. If he wanted to, he could end this charade with a single phone call, summoning lawyers and board members to witness this petty crime. But the time wasn't right, the trap wasn't fully sprung yet. He had to endure the cold to prove the depth of their rot. Sometimes, you have to let the storm wash away the fake layers. What would you endure to strip your enemy of everything they have? Rhea Caldwell stared at the empty security monitor at her desk, her stomach twisting in a knot that had nothing to do with hunger. She had been ordered to stay at her post but not to intervene, a directive that came straight from Marlowe's personal assistant. Let the system reboot, they had lied, a transparent excuse, but she could see Gideon on the external camera feed clearly. He was a dark shape against the gray static of the storm, standing with a dignity that made the cruelty inside feel viler. She looked around the vast, echoing lobby, checking for observers, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Protocol dictated she stay seated, answer phones, and smile, but her conscience was screaming louder than the company handbook. She grabbed her keycard, the plastic digging into her palm, and stood up, her legs feeling shaky but her resolve hardening. She couldn't watch a man freeze to death for a billionaire's joke. There was a line between job security and basic human decency. Rhea moved toward the glass doors, her heels clicking on marble, a sound that seemed deafening in the silence of the night shift. She could see Gideon's face now, pale and streaked with rain, and the way his eyes widened slightly when he saw her approach. He shook his head, a subtle motion, warning her to stay back, knowing that her kindness would paint a target on her back. But she ignored him, reaching for the manual override panel, her fingers trembling as she punched in the emergency code. The mechanism groaned, fighting the digital lock imposed on it, before the doors hissed open, admitting a gust of freezing wind. Rain sprayed onto the polished floor, mixing with the expensive wax, as Rhea reached out, grabbing Gideon's sodden sleeve tightly. "Get in here, Gideon," she whispered, her voice fierce and low, pulling him across the threshold into the forbidden warmth. He stumbled slightly, his muscles stiff from the bitter cold, bringing the scent of ozone and wet pavement into the sanctuary. "You shouldn't have done that," Gideon rasped, his voice rough. He wasn't worried about himself, his eyes were scanning the room, looking for the cameras that were undoubtedly tracking her. "They'll fire you, Rhea. Marlowe is watching this right now." "Let him watch," she snapped, though her hands were shaking. "I'm not going to let you die of hypothermia for a prank." She guided him toward the heater behind the reception desk. She grabbed a stack of corporate-branded towels from a shelf, items meant for the gym used only by executives on the top floor. Draping them over his shoulders, she began to rub his arms, trying to friction some life back into his frozen limbs. The intimacy of the moment hung heavy in the air between them, a stark contrast to the sterile, cold environment of the lobby. For a moment, they weren't guard and receptionist, just people. Two souls finding a small fire in a very dark, cold world. But the peace was shattered by the chime of the elevator, the sound signaling the arrival of judgment from the sky. Rhea froze, her hand still resting on Gideon's wet jacket, as the golden doors slid open to reveal the source of the malice. She had broken the rules, crossed the invisible class line, and now the bill for her compassion was coming due. Kindness is dangerous when you work for a monster with power. Are you brave enough to pay the price for doing what is right? The elevator doors opened to reveal the sleek, polished interior, a moving room of mirrors that reflected the ego of its owner. Marlowe Kingsley stepped out, flanked by two sycophantic aides, his presence immediately sucking the oxygen out of the large lobby. He was dressed in a suit that cost more than Gideon's yearly pay, the fabric shimmering under the lights, untouched by any storm. He smiled, but it was a predator's smile, devoid of any warmth, a baring of teeth that signaled violence dressed up as corporate policy. Kingsley Tech was built on the promise of connecting humanity, but the architecture of the headquarters screamed of separation. The lobby was a cathedral to wealth, with soaring ceilings, and abstract art that looked down on the workers like judgment. Every surface was hard, reflective, and aggressively cold, designed to make the individual feel small, temporary, and replaceable. It was a campus fueled by the ego of a man who played God, treating his employees like lines of code to be deleted at will. Marlowe walked slowly toward the reception desk, clapping his hands, a slow, mocking applause that echoed off the marble walls. "How touching," he sneered, his voice smooth like oiled glass. "The help helping the help. It's almost poetic, isn't it?" He stopped a few feet away, careful not to step in the puddles, looking at the wet floor with a theatrical expression of disgust. Rhea, my dear, you seem to have confused your role here. You are a receptionist, not a savior for stray, wet dogs. Gideon stepped in front of Rhea, shielding her from Marlowe's gaze, water still dripping from his nose, but his posture ramrod straight. She was doing her job, sir. Ensuring the security of the asset. Marlowe laughed, a bark of amusement that lacked any humor. The asset? You think you are an asset, Gideon? You're a cost. A liability. And looking at this mess, a slip-and-fall lawsuit. He gestured to the water on the floor as if it were toxic waste. This building, Marlowe continued, looking up at the chandelier, is a temple of excellence. We do not tolerate mediocrity. We do not tolerate weakness. And we certainly don't tolerate, he paused, looking at Rhea with eyes dead as shark's eyes, insubordination from staff who can be replaced by an algorithm. The threat hung in the air, sharp and undeniable as a blade. Rhea stood her ground, though her face had gone completely pale. The opulent surroundings only highlighted the ugliness of the moment. Gold fixtures and Italian marble could not hide the moral rot. This was the reality of the tech giant, a shiny, perfect exterior, hiding a core of absolute disdain for the people who built it. Gideon watched Marlowe, cataloging every insult, every sneer. He wasn't just a guard, he was a vault gathering evidence. Every act of cruelty was another deposit in the account of justice. Marlowe pulled a silk handkerchief from his pocket, dabbing his nose, acting as if the very presence of wet workers was an assault on his senses. Clean this up, he commanded, dropping the silk into a puddle. Both of you. Before I decide to clean house in a different way. He turned his back, dismissing them as if they ceased to exist. But he didn't see the look that passed between Gideon and Rhea. It wasn't fear anymore, it was the spark of a shared rebellion. When you build a castle on ego, you forget the foundation is fragile. Marlowe didn't return to the elevator immediately, he lingered, watching as Rhea scrambled to find a mop, her hands shaking. He pulled out his phone, the screen illuminating his amused face, and began to record, treating their humiliation as content. Live from the lobby, he narrated to an invisible audience, where it seems we have a plumbing issue named Gideon. He zoomed in on Gideon, who was wringing out his soaked cap, narrating the scene with a commentary dripping with sarcasm. Look at this, Marlowe laughed, circling them like a vulture. This is what happens when you don't have ambition, folks. You end up mopping floors at midnight while the winners celebrate. He shoved the phone camera uncomfortably close to Gideon's face. Say hello to the shareholders, Gideon. Tell them you're sorry. Gideon stared into the lens, his expression unreadable and stony. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He just memorized the moment. Rhea returned with the mop, her eyes red-rimmed and teary, and began to wipe the floor, the water swirling dark and gray. Marlowe shifted his focus to her, filming her bent posture. And here is Rhea, breaking protocol to let the stray in. Rhea, tell the viewers why you decided to compromise security. He was freezing, sir, she whispered, not looking at the camera. Fascinating, Marlowe drawled. Empathy. Such a quaint defect. He kicked the bucket of water, not enough to tip it over, but enough to make slosh water over the side onto Rhea's shoes. Oops, he said, his voice flat. Clumsy me. Clean that too. It was a performance, a cruel little show for his own amusement, a way to assert dominance over the only people in the building. He needed to feel big, so he made everyone else feel small. It was the hallmark of a man who knew he was a fraud deep down. Gideon reached out and took the mop from Rhea's trembling hands. I've got it, he said softly, his voice a low rumble of comfort. He stepped between the camera and Rhea, blocking Marlowe's view. The floor will be dry in 5 minutes, Mr. Kingsley. Marlowe lowered the phone, looking disappointed by the interruption. You're ruining the shot, Gideon. You have a face for radio. He tapped the phone against his chin, bored with the game now. You know, Marlowe said, his tone shifting to something darker. I could fire you both right now. Just for the fun of it. He let the silence stretch, enjoying the tension he created. But I think I prefer this. Watching you know your place. He smirked, satisfied with the terror he thought he saw. He didn't notice Gideon's hand drift to his chest pocket again. The pocket where the proxy voting rights were kept dry. Marlowe finally turned, his shoes clicking away toward the lift. Don't let me catch you shivering again, Gideon. It's unprofessional. The elevator doors closed, swallowing the monster back up. Left alone, Gideon and Rhea stood in the quiet lobby. The humiliation burned, but it also clarified everything. The line was drawn. The war had been declared in silence. Sometimes the villain hands you the weapon you need to destroy them. How long can you hold your tongue before you speak the truth? The next morning, the official narrative had already been spun. Gideon arrived at the security office to find a written warning. Incident report: security breach, unauthorized access via fire door. The report claimed Gideon had propped a door open, compromising safety, and that Rhea had facilitated the breach by disabling the alarm. It was a complete fabrication, a lie typed on official letterhead, signed by the head of security, who was Marlowe's golfing buddy. They were building a paper trail, a reason to terminate with cause. Gideon read the document, his eyes scanning the false accusations. Failure to maintain perimeter. Improper use of company assets. It painted him as incompetent, lazy, and a danger to the firm. He looked up at the camera in the corner of the small office. He knew they were watching his reaction, hoping for an outburst. He folded the paper neatly and placed it in his locker. Rhea found him later by the coffee machine, holding a similar paper. Her hands were shaking as she showed him the verbal warning log. They said I endangered the intellectual property of the company. She looked terrified, her job was her lifeline for her family. Gideon, I can't lose this job. My mom's medical bills. You won't lose it, Gideon said, his voice steady as a rock. I promise you, Rhea. This is just smoke. Don't let them see fear. But it's a lie, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes again. They locked you out. I saved you. How is that a breach? Because the truth doesn't matter to them. Only the narrative. He poured her a cup of coffee, the cheap office brew. Marlowe needs a scapegoat for the board meeting next week. If security looks lax, he can push for his new AI surveillance. Gideon knew the play. It was a classic corporate strategy. Create a problem, manufacture a crisis, and sell the solution. By making Gideon look incompetent, Marlowe could justify spending millions on a contract with a security firm he secretly owned shares in. It was fraud wrapped in the guise of safety and modernization. Gideon had seen the memos, the hidden files on the server. The incident report wasn't just bullying, it was a cover-up. A way to distract the board from the money he was funneling out. Just sign it, Gideon advised her gently. Don't fight it yet. Sign a lie. Rhea asked, looking at him with disbelief. Sign it so they think they've won. So they stop looking at you. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. If they think we are beaten, they will get sloppy. And when they get sloppy, that is when we make our move. Rhea looked at him, searching his face for some kind of hope. She saw something behind his eyes she hadn't noticed before. A keen intelligence, a strategic mind hiding behind the uniform. She nodded slowly, trusting him more than she trusted herself. They were playing a game of chess, and she was just a pawn. But she was beginning to realize Gideon might be the king. A lie can travel halfway around the world while truth puts its boots on. Are you ready to walk through the fire to burn the lie down? Gideon sat in the break room, the incident report forgotten. He pulled out a plain black wallet and extracted a single card. It wasn't his employee badge, and it wasn't a credit card. It was an old, matte black access card with no logo, only a chip. A relic from the days when the company was founded by two men. Marlowe Kingsley, the showman, and Tobias Fairchild, the architect. Tobias, Gideon's father, who had died with a knife in his back. Not a literal knife, but a corporate betrayal that erased him. Marlowe had pushed Tobias out, erased his name from the history, leaving the family with nothing but a small block of useless shares. Shares that held legacy proxy rights in the event of a crisis. And Marlowe had just created the crisis needed to activate them. Gideon turned the card over in his rough, calloused fingers. This card had root access. It opened doors Marlowe didn't know existed. He remembered his father giving it to him on his deathbed. "Keep your head down, son. Wait until the wolf shows his teeth. When he tries to eat the flock, that's when you use this." Gideon had spent 10 years working as a guard in his own company. Watching. Waiting. Living paycheck to stay hidden. He knew the cleaners, the receptionists, the interns by name. He knew the soul of the company better than the CEO ever could. Tonight, he would use the card for the first time in a decade. Not to enter the VIP lounge or steal expensive equipment. He needed to get into the archives, the physical record storage. The servers were good, but paper trails were harder to delete. Marlowe was arrogant. He thought digital erasure was permanent. He forgot that the original bylaws were signed in ink. Rhea walked in, interrupting his thoughts, carrying 2 sandwiches. "I made extra," she said, sliding a turkey sandwich toward him. She didn't ask about the black card he quickly palmed away. "Thanks," he said, offering a rare, genuine smile that softened his face. "You don't have to feed me, Rhea. I manage." "I know," she smiled back. "But even soldiers need rations." She sat across from him, the plastic table feeling like a barrier. "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something?" she asked. "Like your real life is holding its breath?" Gideon looked at her, seeing the fatigue and the hope warring in her eyes. "Every day," he admitted. "But the exhale is coming soon." He tapped the pocket where the black card now resided. "Tonight," he told her, risking a sliver of the truth. "I'm going to check the basement archives. Don't log my location." Rhea paused, her sandwich halfway to her mouth. She didn't ask why. She didn't remind him of the rules. She just nodded, a silent accomplice in his secret war. "The cameras in the basement have a blind spot," she whispered. "North corner. By the ventilation shaft. Trust is the most dangerous weapon in a corporate dictatorship. Who is holding the key to the door you are afraid to open?" The coffee Rhea brought him that night was hot, sweet, and strong. It was a small gesture, a peace offering against the bitter cold. She left it on his desk with a sticky note, "Stay warm." Gideon smiled, taking a sip, feeling the warmth spread in his chest. But the warmth was short-lived. The intercom buzzed angrily. "Security to the front desk." Immediately. It was Marlowe's voice, slurring slightly, drunk on power and wine. Gideon arrived to find Marlowe holding the paper cup like evidence. He was standing by Rhea's desk, looming over her seated form. "Is this what we pay you for, Rhea?" Marlowe asked, crushing the cup. Coffee splattered onto the pristine white desk, staining documents. "To run a catering service for the hired muscle?" Rhea flinched but didn't look down. "It was my break time, sir." "Your time is my time," Marlowe hissed, leaning into her space. "I pay for every minute of your life while you are in this building. And I don't pay you to fraternize with the security staff." He tossed the crushed cup onto the floor, right at Gideon's feet. "Pick it up," he ordered Gideon, not looking at him. "And Rhea, you're being docked a day's pay for misuse of resources." It was petty. It was small. It was beneath a man of his stature. But Marlowe fed on these microaggressions. They sustained him. He punished kindness because it reminded him of what he lacked. Gideon bent down slowly, picking up the crushed cup. His knuckles were white, the only sign of the rage boiling inside. He wanted to snap Marlowe's wrist. He could do it in a second. But that would lose the war. He had to swallow the poison. Is that all, sir? Gideon asked, his voice dead flat. No, Marlowe smiled, eyes glinting. I want you to write her up. Report her for distraction. Use your login. Make it official. He wanted to force Gideon to betray the only friend he had. To make him an accomplice in her humiliation. If you don't, Marlowe whispered, she goes. Tonight. Gideon looked at Rhea. She gave him a tiny, imperceptible nod. She understood. Do what you have to do to survive. Gideon walked to the terminal, logged in, and typed the report. Every keystroke felt like a betrayal, a stain on his soul. Marlowe watched, satisfied, humming a tune under his breath. He thought he had broken them. He thought he owned them. But as Gideon typed, he added a hidden flag to the file. A metadata tag that linked this report to the harassment folder. He wasn't writing a write-up, he was logging evidence for HR. Not that HR would help, but the external auditors might. Marlowe walked away laughing, thinking he had won the round. Gideon looked at Rhea, his eyes apologizing in silence. I'll fix this, he mouthed. I swear on my life. Cruelty creates silence, but in the silence, the resistance grows. How much can you take before the lion inside you wakes up? The archives were dusty, smelling of old paper and forgotten secrets. Gideon moved through the rows of filing cabinets, flashlight dimmed. He used the black card to bypass the biometric lock on the founder's vault. Inside, the air was still, preserving the history Marlowe tried to kill. He wasn't looking for money. He was looking for the Charter of Ethics. A document signed in 1995 that established the voting hierarchy. It stated that if the CEO violated the core values, the proxy activated. He found the box, labeled Fairchild-Kingsley Partnership 1995. His hands shook slightly as he opened the heavy lid. There it was. The original operating agreement. And at the bottom, his father's signature, bold and looping. And Marlowe's signature, smaller, tighter, cramped. Clause 14b in the event of gross moral turpitude or fraud. The Fairchild estate retains 51 controlling interest via proxy. Gross moral turpitude. The phrase echoed in his mind. Humiliating staff, check. Endangered workers, check. Fraud, that was the missing piece. He needed the financial proof. He knew Marlowe was cooking the books to inflate the stock. But he needed the ledger. The real ledger, not the public one. He snapped photos of the charter, high resolution and clear. He had the gun. Now he needed the bullets. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered on. Gideon froze. He dove behind a stack of banker boxes, heart pounding. Footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Slow. Deliberate. I know someone is down here. A voice called out. It wasn't Marlowe. It was the head of IT, a nervous man named Stan. The sensors tripped. Come out, or I call the police. Gideon recognized the voice. Stan was a good man. Terrified of Marlowe. Gideon stood up, hands raised, stepping into the light. It's just me, Stan. Gideon. Running a perimeter check. Stan lowered his phone, exhaling a breath of relief. Jesus, Gideon. You scared me. Why are you in the restricted vault? I heard a noise. Gideon lied smoothly. Chasing a rat. Stan looked at the open box. The Fairchild label was visible. He looked at Gideon, then back at the box. The gears turned. You're Tobias' son, aren't you? Stan whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a realization hitting home. I saw the resemblance years ago. I never said anything. Gideon lowered his hands. Then you know why I'm here. Stan looked at the door, then at Gideon. Marlowe is destroying us. Help me stop him. Gideon said. I need access to the shadow drive. Stan hesitated, then pulled a USB drive from his pocket. Take it. Before I change my mind. Sometimes the legacy you leave is the loyalty you inspired. Are you building a name that people will fight to protect? The graveyard shift had a rhythm, a quiet pulse of its own. With the evidence secured in his locker, the tension eased slightly. Gideon and Rhea sat on the floor of the reception area, 3 a.m. They shared a bag of vending machine chips, their shoulders touching. Why do you stay? Rhea asked softly, breaking the silence. With your skills. You move like a soldier. You could do better. I have unfinished business. Gideon said, staring at the dark glass. What about you? He asked, turning to look at her. Why do you take his abuse? You're smarter than he is. Rhea sighed, tracing the pattern on the marble floor. My sister. She needs a specialist. This insurance covers it. Marlowe pays for her life. She whispered. So he owns mine. It was the trap of the working poor. Survival disguised as employment. Gideon felt a surge of protectiveness so strong it hurt. He doesn't own you, Gideon said, his voice fierce. He reached out, covering her hand with his large, warm one. He rents your time. He doesn't own your soul, Rhea. She looked up, her eyes locking with his. The air shifted. The fluorescent light seemed to dim, the world narrowing to them. You're not just a guard, Gideon. Who are you really? He wanted to tell her. He wanted to spill everything. But safety meant silence. Not just for him, but for her. I'm the man who is going to fix this, he promised. Just hold on a little longer. Can you do that for me? She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers with his. I trust you, she said. I don't know why, but I do. It was a dangerous thing, falling in love in a war zone. But it was also the fuel that kept them moving. Rhea's belief in him gave him the strength to face the morning. He wasn't fighting for a company anymore. Or for revenge. He was fighting for her freedom. For her sister. For the right to sit here, holding her hand, without fear. The sun began to crest over the horizon, painting the lobby gray. The magic hour was ending. The sharks would be arriving soon. Gideon squeezed her hand once, then stood up, adjusting his belt. Back to stations, he said, the mask of the guard slipping back on. Back to stations, she echoed, a sad smile on her lips. But the connection remained, a live wire humming between them. Love is the only rebellion that cannot be crushed by a paycheck. Who gives you the courage to stand up when you want to fall? The server room was cold, loud, and bathed in blue LED light. Gideon used Stan's pass to enter, the fans humming like a hive. He had 10 minutes during the shift change to plant the bug. Not a physical bug, but a software script Stan had written. It would mirror the CEO's private traffic to an external cloud. He found the main terminal, his fingers flying over the keys. This wasn't guard work. This was the result of his military speakops training. He uploaded the script. The progress bar crawled agonizingly slow. 0.98. 0.99. He heard the door handle turn. Gideon dropped to a crouch, sliding under the raised flooring. He watched through the grate as Marlowe walked in with the CFO. How much did we hide in the offshore shell? Marlowe asked. 40 million, the CFO replied. But the audit is coming. Pay the auditors. Marlowe laughed. Buy them lunch. Buy them cars. Gideon held his breath, recording audio on his phone. This was it. The confession. The smoking gun. And the pension fund, Marlowe asked. Did we dip into that? Drained it. Well, replace it after the IPO pumps. If it pumps, the CFO warned. If the product fails, it won't fail because well, fake the demo, Marlowe snapped. Just like we always do. It's all smoke and mirrors, John. They walked right past Gideon's hiding spot. He could see the shine on Marlowe's expensive Italian shoes. 1 sneeze, 1 shift of weight, and it would be over. Gideon lay perfectly still, a predator in waiting. The upload completed with a silent ping on the screen above. Marlowe paused. Did you hear that? Hear what? The CFO asked. Just the fans, Marlowe. They left, the heavy door clicking shut behind them. Gideon rolled out from under the floor, sweating in the cold room. He pulled the drive. He had the data. He had the audio. He had the proof that Kingsley Tech was a hollow shell. A Ponzi scheme dressed up in silicon and glass. He checked the time. He had been in there for 12 minutes. He exited the server room, blending back into the hallway. His heart was racing, but his face was a mask of boredom. He walked past Rhea at the desk. He tapped his chest twice. The signal. I have it. She widened her eyes, then looked down, typing furiously. The trap was set. Now they just needed the stage. The truth is heavy, but the lies are what drag you down. Are you prepared to carry the weight of what you know? Marlowe wasn't done playing. He needed a finale for his ego. He set up a live stream in the main atrium, a town hall for the future. He ordered all staff to attend, forming a backdrop for his speech. He wanted to showcase his loyal workforce to the investors. Gideon was assigned to stand right behind the podium. A prop. Marlowe wanted to contrast the genius and the guard. We are a family, Marlowe beamed into the camera. The view count on the stream was climbing. Thousands watching. I built this from a garage, Marlowe lied, spreading his arms. With nothing but grit and a dream. He turned to Gideon. Isn't that right, Gideon? You see the hard work. He handed the microphone to Gideon, expecting a mumbled agreement. A power move. Forcing the mute to sing. His praises. The entire room held its breath. Rhea watched from the front row. Gideon took the microphone. It felt heavy, like a grenade. He looked at the camera. The red light was steady. Live. He looked at Marlowe, who was grinning like a shark. You didn't build this alone, Marlowe, Gideon said clearly. The room went dead silent. Marlowe's smile faltered. And we aren't a family, Gideon continued, his voice rising. Because you don't lock family out in a storm to freeze. Marlowe lunged for the mic. Cut the feed, cut it, but Gideon stepped back, effortless, keeping the mic out of reach. You don't steal from your family's pension fund, Gideon said. And you don't erase the names of the men who built this. The comments on the live stream were exploding. The guard speaks was trending instantly. Marlowe signaled security. His private hired guns to move in. Get him off the stage, Marlowe screamed, his composure gone. Two thick-necked men rushed the stage. Gideon dropped the mic. No. He handed it to Rhea. Then he squared up. Two quick movements. A disarmed. A takedown. The goons were on the floor before they knew they were hit. Gideon adjusted his uniform jacket. Calm. Unbothered. I'm not just a guard, he said to the room, unamplified but loud. The feed was still running. The world saw the violence. The world saw the CEO screaming like a toddler. And they saw the humble guard dismantle the threat. Rhea held the mic up. He's right, she said, her voice shaking. We have the documents. Marlowe looked at the camera, realizing too late that he hadn't just humiliated a worker, he had martyred him. Hubris is the cliff you build yourself before you fall. What happens when the background character takes the lead? The board of directors called an emergency meeting immediately. They tried to exclude Gideon, locking the boardroom doors. This is an executive session, the secretary told him nervously. Mr. Kingsley is discussing the incident. They wanted to spin it. To fire him before he could speak. To bury the live stream as a disgruntled employee. Mental break. They didn't know about the proxy. Gideon stood outside the double mahogany doors. Rhea stood beside him, holding the folder of evidence. They won't let us in, she said. They don't have a choice, Gideon replied. He pulled out the black card. The master key. Not for the door, but for the company. He tapped it against the reader. Green light. He pushed the doors open. The heavyweight swung wide. 12 heads turned. Marlowe was at the head of the table. He looked disheveled, sweating, shouting at a lawyer. Get out, Marlowe roared. Security, arrest this man. I am security, Gideon said, walking to the empty chair at the end. The chair reserved for the absent founder. And I am also the majority shareholder. The silence was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Excuse me, the board chairman asked, adjusting his glasses. Tobias Fairchild was my father, Gideon stated. He tossed the notarized trust document onto the table. It slid across the polished wood, stopping in front of Marlowe. And under clause 14b, I am activating my proxy rights. Marlowe picked up the paper, his hands trembling violently. He read the clause. He recognized the signature. His face went from red to ash gray in seconds. This is expired. This is old, Marlowe stammered. It's perpetual, Gideon corrected. Until the fraud is exposed. He motioned to Rhea. Show them the ledger. Rhea stepped forward and placed the flash drive on the table. The room shifted. The power didn't just move, it teleported. The wolf was now the sheep, and the shepherd had returned. When you hide your identity, you choose when to reveal your power. Are you the king in disguise waiting for your crown? Read it aloud, Gideon commanded the lawyer, pointing to the trust. The corporate counsel, a man who feared jail more than Marlowe, obeyed. In the event of proven malfeasance. His voice wavered. The Fairchild heir assumes immediate executive voting control. Marlowe sank into his chair, looking like a deflated balloon. You can't do this, he whispered. I am the face of this company. You are the sickness of this company, Gideon replied. Rhea plugged the drive into the projector. The screen lit up with the offshore accounts, the stolen pensions, the fake security reports, the video of the storm incident. The board members gasped. They were rich, but they weren't all corrupt. Some looked horrified. Some looked terrified of the liability. He locked an employee out in a storm, Rhea said. And then tried to ruin my life for helping him. It was a joke, Marlowe pleaded. A prank. Morale building. It was torture, Gideon said. And it ends now. He stood up, placing his hands on the table. I am calling for a vote of no confidence effective immediately. I second the motion, said the board chairman, reading the room. Marlowe looked around, seeing his allies abandoning him. Rats fleeing the sinking ship he had drilled holes in. "I built you." Marlowe screamed at them. "You are nothing without me. We are liable because of you," a board member shot back. "I moved to strip Marlowe Kingsley of all titles," Gideon said. "And to freeze his assets pending the federal investigation." "Federal?" Marlowe choked. "I sent the files to the SEC an hour ago," Gideon said calmly. "The police are in the lobby, Marlowe. Your access is revoked." Marlowe stood up to run, panic taking over. But the door opened. 2 police officers stepped in. Not the private security goons. Real officers. "Marlowe Kingsley?" one asked. "We have a warrant." Gideon watched, his face impassive. No joy. Just justice. He didn't need to gloat. The collapse was total. The truth is a slow arrow, but it never misses the heart. What is the price of a soul sold for a stock price? The vote was unanimous. Marlowe was out. The handcuffs clicked a sound louder than any shareholder applause. As they led him away, Marlowe stopped by Gideon's chair. "You're just a guard," he spat, venomous to the end. "You don't know how to run a company. You'll crash it." Gideon looked him in the eye. "I know how to protect it. I know the people. You only knew the profits." Marlowe was dragged out, screaming threats that faded down the hall. The boardroom was quiet. The remaining members looked at Gideon. "Mr. Fairchild," the chairman asked. "What are your orders?" Gideon looked at his uniform. The patch that said security. "First," he said, "rehire everyone Marlowe fired. Second, restore the pension fund from the executive bonus pool." "But that's our bonuses," a board member protested. "Would you prefer prison?" Gideon asked simply. The board member shut his mouth. "Restoration it is." Third, Gideon turned to Rhea. "Rhea is the new head of HR, me?" Rhea gasped. "Gideon, I'm a receptionist. You are the only person here who understands human value. We need a conscience, not a degree," Gideon stated. The board nodded. They were too afraid to argue. "And what about you?" the chairman asked. "Will you take the CEO suite?" Gideon looked out the window at the city skyline. The storm had passed. The sun was fully out now. "No," Gideon said. "I'm not a CEO. I'm a guardian. I will hold the voting block. I will watch you. But I'm going back to the lobby. Someone has to open the door. Someone has to make sure no one is ever locked out again." It was a baffling decision to them. To refuse the throne. But to Gideon, it was the only choice that made sense. Power corrupts if you sit in the tower too long. He belonged on the ground, where the real work happened. He signed the final papers. The coup was over. He had unlocked the company with one vote. True power isn't about ruling, it's about serving. Where do you stand when the walls of hierarchy come down? Marlowe made one last attempt as he was being processed. He tried to bribe the officers. He tried to call the governor. But the live stream had gone viral. The world had seen the truth. No politician would touch him. He was radioactive. His last attempt at control was a desperate press release, claiming Gideon was a violent usurper, a mentally unstable vet. But the comments section told a different story. People were sharing stories of Gideon holding elevators. Of Gideon jumping starts cars in the parking lot. Of Gideon sharing his lunch. The guard was a hero. Marlowe's attempt to smear him only polished his armor. Back at the tower, the atmosphere transformed instantly. The fear evaporated. People were talking, laughing. The invisible walls between departments crumbled. Gideon walked through the lobby, still in his uniform. Staff members stopped to shake his hand. Some clapped. He felt uncomfortable with the praise. He just nodded. Just doing the job, he muttered. He found Ria at the front desk, packing her personal items. Moving up to the 40th floor. He asked, leaning on the counter. I'm scared, she admitted. I don't know if I can do it. You stood up to a billionaire in a storm, Gideon reminded her. Managing a department will be a walk in the park. He took her hand. And they'll be right downstairs. Watching the monitors, she smiled. Keeping me safe. Always, he promised. The CEO's office was empty, but the building was full. Full of life. Full of relief. Marlowe sat in a holding cell, stripped of his suit. He was just a man now. A small, angry man. He realized too late that money couldn't buy loyalty. He had built a fortress of gold but forgot the gatekeeper. And the gatekeeper had the keys all along. The empire didn't fall to an army. It fell to a vote. When the tyrant falls, the silence is replaced by song. What does victory sound like when you fight for the weak? 6 months later. The rain fell again, but it was gentle. Gideon stood by the door, watching the staff leave dry and safe. He had refused the raise, but he accepted the stock options. He donated most of them to a fund for workers' families. Ria came down from the elevators, wearing a tailored blazer. She looked confident, radiant, the weight of fear gone. She stopped in front of him, holding 2 coffees. Shift change, she said, handing him one. Protocol says no loitering, Gideon teased, taking the cup. The head of HR says protocol can be amended, she grinned. She stepped closer, into his personal space. Are you ever going to take that uniform off, Gideon? It reminds me of who I am, he said. And who am not. You're the owner, she whispered. Technically. I'm the guard, he corrected. I just own the lock. She reached up and adjusted his collar, her fingers lingering. Well, the guard is off duty, she said softly. Would you like to get dinner? A real dinner. Not vending machine. Gideon looked at the lobby. It was empty. Safe. ID like that, he said. ID like that very much. They walked out together, through the automatic doors. The doors opened smoothly. No red lights. No locks. They stepped into the rain, but this time, they shared an umbrella. Marlowe was a memory. The company was a community. And the man who held the keys finally found a home. He had tested them, judged them, and fixed them. But in the end, the best thing he unlocked was his own heart. Safety isn't walls or cameras. It's knowing you aren't alone. The storm is over. The door is open. Walk through. The storm washed away the false gold of Kingsley Tech, leaving behind something stronger: truth. Gideon didn't need the corner office to lead, he needed his integrity, and that was the one asset Marlowe couldn't steal. Justice wasn't just about punishing the villain, it was about protecting the vulnerable, a lesson written in the bylaws of a father's legacy and enforced by the quiet courage of a son. They walked into the gentle rain, no longer master and servant, but partners in a world they had rewritten together. If you believe that true power belongs to those who protect, not those who take, then welcome home. Subscribe to join our community of storytellers who know that even the quietest voice can start a revolution. Check out the playlists below for more stories of hidden identities and justice served. You might find another hero hiding in plain sight. Like, share, and comment unlocked if you're ready to open the next door with us. Turn on notifications, the next storm is coming, and you won't want to miss who steps up to stop it.